Well, good morning, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Free for All Friday edition of the Dan Clemens Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clemens, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is February 16th, the year of our Lord 2018. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful Central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. Hopefully everything's working here. I think my mic seems to be maybe a little bit hot here. Let me adjust the levels here just a little bit. It seems like every day I come in here, I don't know if it's just the weather or whatever, so I got to reset my microphone because it seems to be getting a little bit on the hot side. But hopefully everything's great there. You can hear me and understand me. If my buddy Dave's listening to me this morning from the great state of Tennessee, hopefully you're having a good day and everything's going well for you. And anybody else that might be listening live, I've been getting some listens on some of my live broadcasts this past week because I think there were some important messages we're putting out. And today I entitled the show, The Florida School Shooting, What's Next? Now, I'm not going to go over all the facts about the Florida school shooting. I'm not going to rehash all that because it's just not what I need to be doing because you've got all that in the news. I can't do any more than those folks, and hopefully if you're listening to the show, you're informed enough, you know what's going on. So I don't want to talk about that, but I want to talk about some of the other things surrounding the shooting. Some of the things you may not be aware of that the lamestream media may not be bringing out to you, or other news outlets that you might be partial to aren't looking into these questions and aren't reporting them. And we're going to be talking about the FBI's role in all of this and where I think they fumbled the football with this. Local law enforcement also is playing a role in this, and I found out something this morning that I did not know. And we'll get into that article, too, about how sheriff's deputies were called 39 times in 3 years to the residents of the Florida shooter. Now, we're, for reasons that I'll explain here real quick, we're not going to use the shooter's name in this. I have come to understand, I used to put the names out of these monsters, but watching several videos and reasoning some things through about it, I'm not going to do that anymore because it does seem to feed into the frenzy, the hero worship, the narcissistic tendencies of some folks, things like that. Plus, we're also going to talk about, and I'm just going to bring this up. I don't have any articles. We brought this issue up before. We're going to talk about the role of pharmaceutical medicines when it comes to mass shootings or shootings in general or suicides. This is being downplayed a lot. By the lamestream media and by folks who are asking these questions. I was talking to a lady on Facebook this morning, and she says, well, there's a lot of people that take these antidepressants and ADD and ADHD and all this other meds for mental issues that they have. Why aren't there more school shootings? And I misspoke myself when I was talking to her. I said, well, I should have said mass shootings and suicides in general, which there is a mounting evidence about that. We're not going to dwell on that. I just want to give that to you as information in passing. I have some questions that I think we're going to try to answer throughout the show. If I don't get them all answered, I apologize. If you want me to comment on something, go to the danclemenshow.com and click on the comment button or the connect button, and it'll send you to my email, and you can ask me any questions you want. I've actually put up a new email. It's the danclemenshow.com. Let me get over here real quick so I'm making sure that I give you the correct email address. Let's see here. It's danc@thedanclemenshow.com. That's the new contact email that I put on the website. And that's where it'll send that to you, and you can send questions to me on that, and that's specifically just for the website to send me inquiries of what I think about something, or if I know some sources maybe I didn't give out, or a line of research that I'm going through. So please, if you have any questions or you think I'm not doing enough to give you the information that you need, please let me know. I don't want to mislead somebody here. And whenever I talk to people on Facebook, sometimes I type faster than I think, if you can believe that. So I don't want to leave a false impression with somebody. And I don't want to get into frivolous arguments with folks like this one gentleman on Facebook. We're talking about gun control after this happened. And I don't think there's really a good or bad time to start talking about what can be done to prevent these. I really don't. I know the families have to take time to grieve, and I don't expect them to get into any of these discussions anytime soon. But the rest of us, even though our hearts go out to them, these folks, and as parents, our hearts ache at the loss of these parents or these husbands, like the coach that passed away that was shielding his students. We have a certain amount of detachment from the actual event. So we're not going through a grieving process as the families would. So we can sit back and we can start talking about these things. There's a lot of questions that remain. What can be done to prevent these tragedies? Now, a lot of people just throw their hands up and say nothing. Can't do anything. Evil prevails in the world, and I agree with them. Evil people will do evil things. Now, I was accused by a friend of my cousin out in Iowa of stating that everybody's evil, which I never stated that. I went back and recopied my comments, and I said, you're putting words in my mouth. You're projecting your ideology onto what I'm saying. This gentleman was using some false stats. He was looking up some statistics about self-defense shootings, and he came up with a 56 or 57% of the time you either you get injured or a family member gets injured. And I went and found that research, and he misstated the research. And in his wording, I understand that, and it just looked like he was doing that on purpose to make his points more poignant, as it were, if you want to forgive the pun, or more effectual. And I called him on it, and he got upset. And it's like, you can't get upset because I call you on some facts. And the fact is, 56 or 57% of the time, when people are defending themselves, the person to get shot is the perpetrator. Whoever is, doing that, especially when we're talking about defending your home or your person with a pistol. And that's what they were talking about, breaking that down. And I was told by a couple other folks on her thread that I need to find a new way to protect my family. I choose to protect my family with firearms. Now, I could, I'm very proficient with bow and arrow. I could go back to using a bow and arrow, and that would be almost as effective as a firearm, although it would be a slower rate of fire. But that's not what I choose to use. I choose to use a firearm, a pistol. I have a shotgun in my gun cabinet sitting behind me. Folks, that's my choice. And I have that Second Amendment right to defend myself. And I don't want to get too far afield here because we're talking about the Florida school shooting, but a lot of these questions, do we need new gun control laws? Is there an educational solution to this? One of the things that was brought up, and we're not going to really get into today, and I thought it was kind of a non-starter, was that, well, if we allow teachers to be armed in the classrooms, and we allow staff members and principals and whatever resource officers to be armed, what is that telling the children? They're seeing these people walking around with these guns. Well, first of all, most of the teachers, I would think, would have their weapon either in their purse or in a concealed position on their body, to where it's not readily seen. And so the children wouldn't be threatened by that. And kids are smart. Kids are smarter than a lot of adults give them credit for. And if you explain to them why this teacher is armed, that just for their protection, and leave it at that. You don't have to get into gory details, but just say, hey, we don't want bad people coming in here and doing bad things. Leave it at that. Now, that may be a little simplification of it, but when they talk about educational solutions, they're talking other than arming the teachers. there's a lot of folks that are calling for an outright ban of firearms in America, that we need to just ban all firearms and do a confiscation. Well, when you got 300 million firearms in the country and you try to confiscate them, I think it's going to be a little more problematic than what people think. And some folks are saying, well, we can just do a buyback. Well, first off, the Second Amendment's still in force, and that, leaving that argument aside, the next point I want to make is I don't want my tax dollars going to buy back legally obtained firearms from citizens because you don't feel comfortable. Is that a good use of tax money? There's a question that can be asked there. Again, armed teachers and school staff. Police, something that actually came out, and I think this is a very good idea. Not only have a police presence at the schools, but you know what? There's a lot of veterans out there that want to give back to their country again. You know, that aren't serving in the military anymore, that are very capable of defending themselves and those around them, of having veterans come in and share the burden of protecting our children. And I've actually read some stories where some veterans organizations are actually offering free services. You know, that they'll make sure that their members are qualified and trained, and they can rotate in and out of the schools, you know, on a part-time basis, maybe do 1-2 days a week, you know, or just 1 day a week, you know, to make sure our kids from kindergarten all the way up to, you know, high school to 12th grade are protected against thugs and mentally ill people coming into school and shooting up our kids because they're an easy target. So there's a thought there. And again, if you have any other thoughts or you have any more questions about this, don't hesitate to get a hold of me. I answer all questions that are put to me as to the best of my ability. If I can't answer it, I'll tell you that I need to do some more research on it and get back with you, or I might even invite you to do some research with me to do that. But what's next after the Florida school shooting is what this program is going to be about. And we're going to be talking about some of the shortcomings before this happened. And we're going to talk about some of the shortcomings that happened in other mass shootings in America, not just school shootings, and some of the failures of law enforcement, from the FBI on down to the local law enforcement. Some of those failures that are out there. So again, we're going to be talking about this instead of just focusing in on the shooters themselves. So today's program is being brought to you by Sears Direct, Sears Part Direct. Now, I've used these folks in the past to help me get my gas stove working again. I've bought parts off of them to fix an older dryer that I needed parts for. I don't have it anymore, but I was actually able to extend the life of that dryer by years because I rebuilt some things on it to save me a lot of money. And I've actually bought lawnmower parts off of them to fix a lawnmower, an older lawnmower that I have. And they're fantastic folks over there. If you fix the stuff around your house, by all means, you can't find the parts at home, go to Sears Part Direct by going to the danclumisshow.com and clicking on the widget on the page, Sears Part Direct. You'll not only be getting the parts you need, but if you go on there, you'll be getting a 10% discount. And that'll save you the cost of shipping for almost any items that you get there. So if you're the handy person at the house, the handyman or handy woman, and you need parts for whatever you're working on, and you don't know where to go to Sears Part Direct to get those parts taken care of. All right, today's daily Bible reading comes from the book of Psalms, chapter 19, verses 7 through 10. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is true, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, much than fine gold, sweeter also than the honey and the honeycomb. And this is the psalmist, David, King David the psalmist, praising God here and telling you how perfect God is and how everything he does, that God does, is for our betterment. Today's quote meal comes from Benjamin J. Elger. The voices of the world are loud and sparse, but the voice of God is a constant whisper. And today is a short bulletin article by Mike Riley over at gewatkins.net, and it's how your congregation can come alive. And he gives about 10 or so pointers on how your congregation can come alive and stay a vibrant congregation and what it needs to do that. And I think he makes some really good points in there. Matter of fact, he's made some points in that article that I've been making to some of our members at our congregation here, that something they really need to think about. Oh my, coffee's good today. Ooh. All right. Now let's just get into this right now. I do have a video later on, if we get to it, by C.E. Cupp over at Headline News. And I found this article on the Daily Wire, and there's a YouTube video where she takes on some journalists who are becoming activists. Instead of just being journalists and reporting the news outside. And look, I don't care if journalists have opinions, but on news programs, they used to have a spot where you could actually put those opinions on, that you could actually state those opinions and what they were. But now it seems like all we get in the mainstream media is opinion, activism, and very little news about what's going on. So if we get down there, I don't know if we're going to have time for that today, but if we get down there, we'll definitely share that with you. Now, this article over at the Daily Wire on how stupid is the FBI, couldn't find high school shooter even though he used his real name in a YouTube threat. And this has been verified by other news outlets, and this is they actually have the screenshot of this comment. Is the FBI completely incompetent, or is the Bureau just stupid? Unfortunately, those are the only two choices available at this point. Now, this is a story written by Joseph Curl over at Daily Wire, and he posted this up today. In the aftermath of the tragic shooting, and folks, I gotta get my mouse here, or I'm gonna be in big trouble. For some reason, I knocked my mouse over. Sorry about that. In the aftermath of the tragic shooting at a Florida high school, which left 17 dead and 14 wounded, it was revealed that the FBI had been warned 5 months ago about the shooter, the 19-year-old, and again, I'm not going to say his name. A video blogger on YouTube notified the FBI in September about an alarming comment on a video he posted. "I'm going to be a professional school shooter," read the comment left by the user with the name, the same name of the now confessed shooter. But on Thursday, the FBI agent in charge of the Florida shooting probe said the Bureau, make sure you're sitting down for the next part, could not identify the person who left the comment. That's right, the FBI couldn't identify a YouTuber whose username was literally his real name. Yes, the same FBI which thinks the leaks of emails from a Democrat National Committee was somehow connected to Russians, and the same FBI that wiretapped officials on Donald Trump's presidential campaign. The Bureau had received information about the comment last year, said Robert Lasky, a special agent in charge of the Miami division, but he said the tip did not include details that could have helped. No other information was included with the comment which would indicate a time, location, or the true identity of the person who made that comment, he told reporters. The FBI conducted database reviews, checks, but was unable to further identify the person who actually made the comment. And I made some comment. I'm going to stop reading here. I made some comments myself about this. They were too busy looking for the Russian boogeymen instead of doing their jobs. And I'm going to share you some other, this next story I'm going to talk about some deputies that they were talking about. Well, the Bureau of Investigation could have started with the ID on the comment. One, the shooter's name. I'm no professional investigator, but that seems a good place to start. Seemed like a good place for me to start if I was going to investigate something or research something, trying to find out who they are. And the FBI has way more resources than I knew for this. And that, to me, that would be the no-brainer. Just do a simple data search for this guy. If they had done that, they might have found a kid's named, and it's the shooter, at Majority Southern Douglas High School, who had been expelled for disciplinary problems. Maybe their ears would have perked up a bit then. Then the FBI might have connected that the shooter with another guy posting things on Instagram where he also used his real name. On the social media site are several photos of the shooter in a mask holding a gun. If the FBI couldn't identify the shooter from his name, how was 4chan able to find all the online accounts and assess that he was a wacko in 1 hour, one Reddit user wrote. But the FBI has been busy jousting with windmills of late. They've been off on a wild goose chase trying to find evidence to prove that Trump colluded with Russians to influence the 2016 election. As part of that effort, they wiretapped phones of Trump's campaign, aides, winning court approvals by using questionable evidences of wrongdoing. So we have just, like I said, I find it incredulous myself that the FBI couldn't identify the shooter. I mean, there can't be that many Nicholas and his last name. There can't be that many people out there with this name that would be in high school. I mean, that'd be a real quick, easy way to narrow things down a little bit. And then start doing a database search on, where would I go next? Where would the next place be that I should go? Why don't we put a call out to the local law enforcement with the shooter's name, saying he wants to be a school shooter, a professional school shooter, and see if something pops up from local Leos. See if something suspicious pops up. And again, can't be that many kids, even if there are a lot of people maybe with that particular name. There can't, there's other criteria. You keep breaking it down and making the data set smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, this is when I found this article this morning. It's by, Joran Steinbuch over at New York Post, and it's posted today. Deputies called to suspect shooter's home 39 times over 7 years. Now, let me stop that. I'm not going to read the article yet. So the FBI said they couldn't identify the shooter. They had his name. The next logical step to me would be to put it out like a bolo to all law enforcement agencies across the country to look to see if there is a name that pops up that matches this and possibly a high school student. I mean, that would be a good guess. A good logical guess to assume that he's either a high school student or just got out of high school, but a person of high school age. And I think if that would have happened, and I don't know if it did, but it seems like it didn't because they didn't know. We couldn't narrow down this comment off this YouTube blogger. But 39 times in 7 years. 39 times in 7 years, deputies were called to the suspect shooter's home. Before the shooter carried out his mass killing at a Florida high school this week, police responded to his home 39 times over a 7-year period, according to disturbing new documents. Details about the calls to the Broward County Sheriff's Office obtained from police records by CNN were not immediately available, and it was impossible to determine if it involved the shooter. But the nature of the emergencies at his Parkland home included mentally ill person, child elderly abuse, domestic disturbance, and missing person, according to KTLA reported. And the schoolmates, Brody Speno, told the network that cops were called to the shooter's home almost every other week. And that may be an exaggeration on Brody's part, but Brody knew the shooter and knew there was a lot of cops there. Seemed like there was a lot of cops. Every other day cops were there. Like I said, an exaggeration. But 39 times in 7 years, that's quite a bit. For someone to be called to someone's presence. Something wasn't right about him, Speno told CNN. He was off. Speno said he knew the shooter from elementary school and described him as an evil kid who was always getting in trouble. The shooter, who posted images of himself on Instagram posing with guns and knives, he confessed to killing the 17 people at Majority Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland and made an alarming online comment about a recent mass shooting. "Man, I can do so much better," he wrote. But yet, maybe this is where, we talked about, could there be some laws that are put on the books to try to prevent this? Outside of trying to confiscate legal guns, legally obtained guns, which, for all intents and purposes, it seems like the shooter did buy his AR-15, 223 caliber. I was questioning the other day because I seen the Instagram photos where he had semi-automatic pistols like I do. And I thought, maybe that one of those was used in the shooting, but they were saying it was the AR-15, and I'm like, okay, I'll take it at face value on that. I'm just asking some questions about that. But isn't there anything the local law enforcement could have done to maybe alert other people about this, or maybe look into, this guy isn't really all there, and maybe try to get some type of mental evaluation of this young man? I mean, my goodness, I had a friend that, more of an acquaintance and a friend, that got in trouble over some domestic violence in his house, and here in Pennsylvania, the authorities took every weapon out of that house, and it was asked if he had lent out any, and I actually had a 30-06 of his, and I had to go turn that in, even though I said, well, I'll keep it locked up in my house, won't let him get it. That wasn't good enough. I had to take it to the county sheriff's office and turn it in. If this turns out to be, these 39 calls were to the shooter's house, there had to be something that the police could have done to alleviate him of his weapons, and maybe block him from owning some more until they could get to the bottom of why they had to be called so often, or what was going on. But again, the FBI knew 5 months ago, and if they'd have put this information out to local law enforcement, do you have someone by this name that had some run-ins with the law? Now, let's say this didn't happen, just for argument's sake. Let's say that these 39 times in 7 years weren't to the shooter's house, okay? But the name, let's say the name was the same, but the police didn't go there, and let's say there was nobody else in that precinct or whatever, that protectorate, that the police visited. I think it would have still behooved the FBI to put that out, to find out. And it seems like they didn't do that. It seems like the FBI fell down on the job again. And it bothers me that our top law enforcement agency gets these things wrong. And this isn't the first time, folks. It really isn't. I have this other article by the Daily Caller. FBI keeps missing mass shooter warnings. This is by Peter Hasen over at, he's an associate editor at Daily Caller. Now, he posted this out yesterday. Revelations that the FBI had been warned about Florida high school shooter fit an all too familiar pattern in which apparent law enforcement errors have preceded mass murders. The FBI warned about the shooter after he posted on YouTube saying he was going to become a professional school shooter. The agency said they couldn't identify the user who made the threat, despite the shooter posting under his own name. 5 months later, the shooter pulled the fire alarm at Majority Stoneman Douglas High School and began shooting his former classmates with an AR-15. Other mass shooters and terrorists were similarly on the FBI's radar, or should have been, before they carried out their deadly attacks. Now, I'm going to use some of these names because they were long past, and it's not my habit anymore to do that, but just so you know who we're talking about. Dylan Roof, who in 2015 shot 9 people at a black church in Charleston, was allowed to purchase his weapon in part because of an errors by FBI agents during the background check process, the agency said. Pulse shooter Omar Mateen, who pledged allegiance to ISIS before killing 49 people at the Orlando nightclub, similarly seemed to have fallen through the cracks. The FBI investigated Mateen twice before the slaughter, but ruled him not a threat both times. And again, let me stop there. I don't know what their criteria is not a threat. Here the guy pledged allegiance to ISIS, and this Pulse nightclub was a known gay hangout. And the guy goes in there and starts killing people. The FBI knew the Fort Hood shooter, Army Major Nadal Hassan, had been in contact with Al-Qaeda terrorist Anwar al-Awlaki, but declined to investigate him. A congressional probe found that the FBI had failed to alert the Army about Hassan, and that the shooting could and should have been prevented. Hassan killed 13 people and wounded dozens of others in a 2009 shooting. The FBI similarly missed opportunity to stop Tamarin Tazanov, one of the brothers behind the 2013 Boston bombing. A government review found Russia warned the United States that Samav, I have a hard time with these names, folks. Samav had association with Islamic terrorists, leading an FBI-led task force to question the future terrorists. The agent who interviewed this guy closed the probe, having found no link or nexus to terrorism, even though the Russians gave them the evidence. The task force was alerted a year earlier that Samav was leaving the country for Dagestan, but declined to interview him or stop him from leaving the country. FBI agents later said the failure to interview Samav was a huge error, according to Boston Magazine. Another school shooter who was on the FBI's radar killed 2 students at a New Mexico high school just 2 months ago. Although the killing didn't meet the government's definition of a mass shooting, the shooter was known to the FBI. The agency investigated the shooter, 21-year-old William Atchison, in 2016 after he commented online about committing a mass shooting. Again, maybe this is where some of these laws have to change. Maybe this is where we're falling down on things in these investigations, where they need to scrutinize these folks a little bit more. And if there's questions about it, I think the next step should be, especially if they're threatening, I mean, that's terroristic threats, folks. Bottom line, they committed a crime just by saying those things, and I'm going to, commit a mass shooting, or I'm going to go to be a professional school shooter. That's a terroristic threat. That's against the law. I think that's more than enough for the FBI to either detain them or to look in to see if they own firearms and maybe confiscate the firearms, or have the local law enforcement, local LEOs, actually confiscate them and put them on, not take them away from them, but get them out of his reach, and put a notice into the background checks that there's a temporary hold on this gentleman buying firearms anymore. Now, that's not going to stop somebody who's intent on doing any of these atrocities from trying to go out and obtain an illegal firearm. But that's a whole different crime in and of itself. The firearms in this Florida high school shooting were legally obtained. They were legally obtained. And then they were used illegally. Now, if you think about it, and I was looking at some stats, and I was trying to find the actual website where these stats came from, and I'm still doing some research on that. But it was a Second Amendment group out there that actually was doing some research. They were saying something like 99% of all firearms in the United States are legal and not used, or 99% of all legal firearms are never used in the commission of a crime. So we're only talking about like 1% of the firearms in America that are legally obtained. And we're talking about 300 million firearms that are legally registered here in the United States. So you're talking about, now it's a good sized number, but it's a very small number in comparison to how many firearms are legally owned in the United States. And they went on some other stuff there. So this is not to take away from the carnage that happened at the high school, and this is not to excuse any of this. But I think in these discussions after these active shooting events, these mass killings, these questions need to be asked and see, because those folks that are pro-gun control are going to trot out statistics all day long. And they're going to trot out fake stories all day long. Now, let me see here. Okay. The faith story that we really need to dig into, and this is something, as soon as I heard it, I had already been reading debunks to this story. And this was posted today by Ryan Severda over at Daily Wire. Fake news. Associated Press refuses to take down this debunked tweet that went viral. The left-leaning Associated Press helped fuel an unsubstantiated narrative on Thursday when it quickly spread a poorly sourced claim that the left-leaning Anti-Defamation League, which claimed that the Florida gunman was a member of a white supremacist militia group in Florida. I've been doing Ali journalistic integrity. Excuse me. Abandoning. My eyes just crossed there, folks. Abandoning all journalistic integrity, the Associated Press took a statement from the leader of the Republic Florida militia, Jordan Jareb, that gunman Nicholas Cruz was part of his organization as fact. In a tweet that got approximately 40,000 retweets, the Associated Press wrote, breaking, leader of white nationalist group has confirmed suspect in Florida school shooting was member of his organization. Only a couple hours later, police confirmed that they had found no information that connected the shooter to this group. And Jareb even admitted this claim was not true. Now, let me stop reading there. I actually had this, this guy is over on Gab AI, this Jareb, and he actually upvoted a comment on Gab. I won't get into it, but he upvoted a comment of mine. And as soon as I saw the name, I put two to two together. So, I'm thinking this has got to be the same guy, same name. And I went on his websites, and sure enough, it was the same person. And so this thing was debunked almost as soon as it was put out. In 2014, in fact, he wrote us to complain that we had not already listed ROF as a hate group. In 2017, Michael Tubbs, the leader of the Florida chapter of the League of the South, a well-known hate group, wrote that Jareb never misses a photo op and called him a nut job who should be avoided. Make no mistakes, the Associated Press has left their false tweet up for hours for one reason: to inflict maximum political damage on President Donald Trump. The media are trying to present every white person who commits an evil act as some sort of white supremacist who they then try to tie to Trump. Now I'm not going to finish up the reading there. Not all shootings, church shootings, school shootings, mass shootings, whatever, are committed by white guys. The vast majority of them seem that way outside of Chicago. But the one glaring mistake, and I'm pretty sure my buddy Dave pointed this out to me, that the Antioch Church of Christ shooting in Tennessee was a black man. Mass shootings involve, according to the FBI definition, and the number varies between who you talk to, between 3 and 4. I would say 3 and above would be considered a mass shooting. Far and away in Chicago is the leader of mass shootings in the country. And yes, it is due to gun violence. And if you look at the case of what's going on there, almost all the guns involved, not every single one, but the vast majority of the guns involved are either stolen, which means illegally obtained, or purchased illegally. Okay? And some things are coming out about this, these straw man purchases, where someone buys a gun and then sells it to somebody else without going to a gun dealer to transfer it. Again, there's no statistics on that. How many of these are actually going on. I mean, there's probably some numbers out there, and I've read numbers all over the place, but there's no firm information. If you do have firm information, please let me know. Either leave it in your comments down below this video, or send me, again, go to the DanClementShow.com and click the contact button on the menu and send me an email. Let me know. I've heard all sorts of things going on here about, we got to shut, the politicians got to shut down this gun show loophole. And what they're talking about is you can go to a gun show and walk away with that gun from the gun show. That's only if you pass a background check. Period. If you are out of state, going to another state at a gun show, yes, you can purchase a gun at that gun show, and yes, you can have a background check done, but they're not going to give you that gun there. They will mail it to a federal firearms dealer of your choosing near your, and a lot of times they'll help you find them if you don't know one, because they're not allowed to let you walk out of that gun show if you're out of state. So there's no gun show loophole. Sounds good. It's a good talking point for the news, but there's no gun show loophole there, folks. There's all sorts of erroneous ideas going around here on how we can do this. Now, the other thing that I want to get into quickly before we get to a couple more stories here is, and this is another Daily Wire story here by James Barrett, posted today. Flat wrong. Washington Post torches much cited school shooting stats. A frequently cited statistic about school shooting is so egregiously misleading that even the generally left-leaning Washington Post has been forced to call out the flat wrong claim. After the horrific mass school shooting at Parkland, Florida High School on Wednesday, which was carried out by a 19-year-old former student with a history of psychological and behavioral problems, several headlines and social media posts have included the claim that there have been 18 school shootings in 2018, but as the Daily Wire reported Wednesday, a closer look at the numbers show that that was simply untrue. The phony statistic comes from anti-gun group Everytown for Gun Safety, which has a habit of conflating accidental gun discharges, suicides, and mass shootings to inflate numbers as a means to promote their gun control agenda. This time, Everytown's fake statistic was so misleading that the Washington Post felt compelled to publish a fact-checked article titled, "No, there hasn't been 18 school shootings in 2018. The number is flat wrong." As the Post points out, only 5 of the 18 supposed school shootings actually occurred during school hours and resulted in any injuries. Okay? And if you count the deaths, I was watching Ben Shapiro last night. If you actually count the deaths, there's only been 3 school shootings if you go by fatalities. And this has been floating around for days here, and I've been trying to find out, so, man, that just seems like too high a number. You know, and every time I tried to research it on DuckDuckGo, it just kept coming back to these same articles that had the same headlines, like they're being regurgitated. And so it wasn't until I actually literally, because even on DuckDuckGo, for some reason, the search results for Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire, one of their reporters' articles came out. It was buried. I had to go like 3 pages deep on the search results before I got there, because everybody was talking about 18 school shootings in 2018. Oh, the horror. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, 5 is too many. 1's too many. 1 school shooting in America is too many. But to go through and falsify the data to inflate the number to 18 is disingenuous, and I dare say criminal. It's almost liable, as far as I'm concerned, that they would put something out like this erroneously and massage the facts when the facts just don't. And again, I'm surprised when I saw this article here, Washington Post, which is very left-leaning, owned by Mr. Bezos of Amazon fame, very left-leaning. And I was surprised that they came out and torched this. It was like, whoa, it must be bad. When I saw this, I'm thinking, I already knew this from last night, but when I saw this, I'm like, this must be really bad if the Washington Post isn't agreeing with it. And it is. And folks, this is the point I want to make with this. It does nobody any good to lie about these things, because the truth can be found out. And you know what? I don't even give them the benefit of the doubt that they're just looking at these things from a different point of view. They're not. They're Everytown for Gun Safety is, and I found this out in my research, and I talked about this years ago when I first heard about them, and then when I seen their name again, I thought something scratched in the back of my head about it. And then when they started bringing it up, I'm like, oh yeah, that's that group. That every gun that's fired around a school is a school shooting. And that's basically what they were claiming. That's where they get the 18 number. Any gun shooting around a school, period, is a school shooting. Now, one of them, if you read through the article, I'll let you read through this. I thought it was a little comical. At a criminal forensic lab in a school, there was an accidental firing of a gun. Nobody was hurt. No one was even close to getting hurt. but it was in a forensic lab. And what do they do in forensics labs? Well, sometimes they have to fire the guns to see if the bullet matches, like they take a bullet out of a dead person or a bullet out of a live person, and they match it up to a bullet of a gun that they've confiscated off a suspect. And if it matches, then they're guilty, right? And that's what happens. And so I thought that was kind of comical that one of these shootings at every town for gun safety was using that statistic as a school shooting. Now, let me make this point. I made this a week or so ago, and it still hasn't been picked up by Rush Limbaugh or any of the big ones. And so, I'm just going to say this, Rush, I'm coming after you in a competition type of way. I've noticed more and more folks on the left that are pro-gun control are not using gun control anymore. That term has got a sour taste in people's mouths. So now what they're calling it or talking about, and I think they're trying to catch traction, is gun safety. They're not calling it gun control anymore. They're calling it gun safety. Oh, you got to be for gun safety. Well, who in the right mind wouldn't be for gun safety, but define your terms? It's just like this gentleman on Facebook this morning. He's saying, well, militia, when they had the Second Amendment was penned, we didn't have a National Guard back then. It was called the militia. And I told him, I said, you're wrong in conflating the two or comparing the two together. A militia was never, a militia never morphed into the National Guard. If you read the 1828 Webster's Dictionary definition of a militia, it's totally different from a fighting force like the National Guard is. Okay? And his only comeback was, well, I wouldn't trust that dictionary. And this guy's part of the lamestream media. I wouldn't trust that dictionary because look at their definition for slavery. And I went and looked at their definition for slavery, and I'm like, don't see anything wrong with that. And I shot it back to him saying, I don't know what dictionary you're looking at, but I'm looking at a 1828 dictionary, and that's not the definition. This is the definition that's in there. I see nothing wrong with it. And this is one of these guys. And there's a lot of regressive liberals out there that do this. They look at the source and they discount anything from that source because they don't like the source. They don't like who owns the source or who's reporting for the source, instead of reading the article, the actual article, and seeing if the article is factual, reasonable, and understandable. Because even in the lamestream media, some of those folks do get the stories right every now and then. Not all the time, but they do get them right. So you can't dismiss everything coming out of the source as wrong just because of the source. Now, I do make one exception to that rule, and that would be CNN. I'm sorry. That's my view of CNN with that. So let me get another drink of this coffee here. It's good this morning. I should say it's good this afternoon because it's afternoon already. All right. So where I want to go next. I do have two articles here I'm not going to get into. I'm not going to read on the show today. They're from 2013 2014. One talks about at least 7 states now have armed staff in schools. And that one's by Elizabeth Flock. She's a staff writer over at U.S. News. And this was posted back in July 30th, 2013. And I think that number's gone up. Pennsylvania is one of those in the story there, and I think that number's actually gone up. Matter of fact, Ohio passed a law that school districts can determine for themselves whether they want armed teachers and staff in the schools, provided that they have, and they set a certain level of training, which teachers can take over the summer. And there's actually a couple conservative gun groups out there that are paying for that training for these teachers. And again, that's one of the questions that we need to be asking is, do we have to have the schools as armed camps? But that depends on what you mean by armed camps. I mean, if the teachers aren't walking around looking like Jesse James or Wyatt Earp with their guns hanging on their hip and, stuff like that, then the students won't know that the teachers are armed or not. And a teacher would be foolish. A teacher would be totally foolish to disclose to the students whether they're armed or not. Now, I think the principal and the superintendent, those folks need to know if a teacher has a carry permit and is trained in a weapon before they can bring it in. But I think to protect the children shouldn't even know if a teacher has a firearm on them or not. And that would keep any potential shooters from figuring out, well, who has and who doesn't. Whose classroom am I going to head to? Because I know they don't have a firearm there. And again, it keeps them guessing. And I just go back to that story about the Detroit City the police chief. Detroit City police chief retired. He went and did a verbal survey with felons that were in jail and asked them who you're more afraid of, the police or an armed private citizen. And the overwhelming majority said the private citizen who's concealed carrying, because we don't know who's carrying. We don't know who's going to step up and John Wayne it, So they're more afraid of that than they are of the police, because they know the police have a response time to get there. It's just like this gentleman that was on my cousin's thread saying the police can take care of it. And I says, I live in an area, by choice, that the quickest response time, unless there's a cruiser passing my house or just pulling into the state troopers barracks about 6 miles away, but if they're out on patrol, the best I can get is 20 to 30 minute response. What am I going to do in the meantime? And I'm not saying I live in a high crime area, and I hope to God it never happens to me or my family, but you never know. And it's better to have and not need than need and not have. So I protect my family with a firearm, hoping and praying to God that I never have to use it against another human being. But on the other hand, training enough with it to know that if I had to, I'd be proficient with it. And that's, to me, that's the warrior mentality. Praying against war, but training just in case, because you never know. So these liberals out there, they want this, gun confiscation and total gun control, and saying, let the police protect you. 20, 30 minutes, me and my family would be dead. And all they'd have to do is bring the coroner with body bags and chalk and investigate and try to find out who killed us. I don't want my extended family to go through that. I definitely don't want my family to go through that. And matter of fact, this is something I heard Glenn Beck say, and I sort of took this to heart and always sort of thought of this, because I don't try to go, I never go looking for trouble. I'll never start a fight. I'll finish a fight, but I don't start them. He stated one time about him and his family sleep on the second floor. And if someone breaks in his house and starts stealing stuff, he's not going to go down and confront them. He's going to stay at the top of the stairs and protect his family. But if they start trying to come up the stairs, which they have no business of doing, he's going to meet them with deadly force. And I agree with him on that. Possessions can be replaced. Most people have insurance on the property, and they can get them replaced. But I can't replace my wife or my daughter. I can't. And so, you can ransack the downstairs all you want if you get around the dog, which all she's going to do is bark at you and wake me up. But you try to come upstairs, I know that your intentions are not pure, because my family's sleeping upstairs. We're home, we're sleeping upstairs. And you will be met with deadly force. I'm sorry, I don't want to. But that's just the gist of the matter. So getting rid of guns is not the answer. A gun buyback or confiscation by the government is not the answer. People talk about, we need an educational solution. Okay, what is it? All I hear is we need this educational solution, or we need this solution, or we need some type of gun control solution, but nobody's bringing forth what their solution is. Reasonable solution. Nobody's bringing that forth. And the only thing I've read lately about the reasonable educational solution is that, it's like I don't know how you want to put this. Basically what they're saying is you don't want to diminish from the children learning because they feel like they're in an armed camp. Because kids need to feel safe in their environment. I'm like, but the teachers and staff members, like I said, would not be walking around like they're Wyatt Earp or Jesse James with their 6-shooter strapped to their side with their hand, down next to their side, ready to quick draw that thing at the moment's notice. It's going to be out of sight, out of mind. And honestly, again, I grew up around guns. I went to high school. I graduated in 1980, so when I went to high school. And from early fall, which is when the school started, to early spring, was small game, deer, the whole 9 yards was in the whole time. And any of the guys, I went to a country high school, but I had friends that went into Findlay City High School that did the same thing because there's no laws against it. I carried it's a shotgun state out there for deer hunting. So all I had was a shotgun. And I still have it. It's a 3-bolt or 3-shot bolt action Mossberg 12 gauge. And it works very well. Thank you very much. And I was a very big small game hunter. So there's a lot of times after school, if I didn't have sports or something, like football or wrestling, I would head out to the woods and do some hunting before I went home. And because, not that we needed to meat, but that's what I hunted for, is meat, because I like wild game. And it actually did help offset some of the expenses that the family had for feeding the family, because I would hunt and I would fish in the summertime. But I had a 12 gauge in my car at school, and never once. And in high school, I can count, I might need 2 hands to count the altercations I was involved in high school. But never once ever did I think about marching my butt out to the car and unlocking the trunk and bringing the 12 gauge in and shooting somebody. And again, like I said, I never, and I'm not bragging about this, I never started a fight, but I sure would finish one. Whether I won or not, I'd finish it up. And to me, that's conflict resolution. Now, people are saying, well, you're just using violence for conflict resolution. You know what? Sometimes that's all you have. Sometimes that's all you're allowed. Sometimes you get bullies, and you're not going to talk your way out of it with a bully. At least I've never been able to talk my way out of it with a bully. And sometimes that's the last resort. You can't get out of there. Coach King told me one time in high school, he was a wrestling coach and also taught self-defense, and he was a brown belt at the time in karate. He said the best way to avoid a punch is not to be there, like on the Karate Kid. So if you can get yourself out of the situation, get yourself out. But if you can't, guess what? There's only 2 recourses. Either you let yourself get beat up or you defend yourself. One of the two. There is no other choice. And so these I don't know what to call them. I really don't. These folks that don't want you to defend yourself, that don't want you to have the ability to defend yourself, and want to leave it up to somebody else. If that's what they want to do, fine. But they don't have a right to take away my ability to defend myself or my folks, me or mine, and my possessions. They don't have that right. Even if we didn't have the Second Amendment, they wouldn't have the right to tell me I can't defend myself. And that's what it boils down to with all this gun control stuff. And no law is going to stop a guy like this in Florida or any of these other mass shootings from laying his hands on a firearm and doing the damage that they do. It's not about gun control. I think what's happening in these mass shootings, especially school shootings, and these other mass shootings besides the drug wars and the turf wars up in Chicago and some other big cities around America, I think one of the underlying factors that really needs to be talked about, and it's not, is these kids are on pharmaceutical drugs for mental illnesses or mental conditions. And it seems, and someone's been tracking this, I've shared this before on the show, from the A&M tower, the university tower shooter, to the present day, almost every one of them had some mental issue that they were being treated for. Almost every one of them. And it amazes me how that hasn't been truly investigated by the press, the government, or anything, because there could be an underlying reason why these things are happening. And it could be other things. It could be our culture of death that we're involved in. I mean, I got to tell you this is funny, Dave. You're going to get a kick out of this, and I don't do anything to anybody to try to get blocked or anything. But my major, and I can't call it that anymore, but my most ardent Facebook antagonist, Kim Eaton, I use her name because she's a published author. I've talked about her op-eds in the Daily Item and stuff like that. She came out. I didn't know what she was talking about at first because she just went on this rant. And at the time she went on this rant, I had not heard the news yet about what happened in Florida. And then I said, well, she's ranting on about something. So I went to the news feeds, and sure enough, there it was. I thought, well, that's what she's ranting on about. And she thinks anybody that's okay with firearms and all this other stuff is culpable in the shooting down there. And I shared a picture of mine. If you're on Facebook, you'll have seen it, of my Canik TP90 9mm pistol. I think I took a very nice picture of it. And I said what the pistol was, and it said never used illegally at the bottom, and posted it up to her. You'd have thought I shot her. The rant that she sent back to me, I read it, and then I was going to try to save it. And after I had read it and then went back over, it was on one of those little pop-up windows that comes into Facebook. It was in that, so I wanted to get it on the regular Facebook page before I took a screenshot. Between the time I read it and the time I went over there, she had blocked me. I can't even search her with my with my personal Facebook. I can't even search her. And basically, she was saying that I am definitely part of the problem, and she said some other awful things in there, and then she just totally blocked me. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And it just, I was laughing. My wife said, "What are you doing laughing?" I said, "Well, Kim Eaton finally blocked me." And it's like, "Really?" And I said, yeah, she finally blocked me. Over all this stuff. Because she's an extreme regressive liberal when it comes to guns. Nobody should own them. Nobody should. The only reason you have a gun is for killing things. True. I mean, I do hunt. I used to. I don't much anymore, especially with my fibromyalgia. But yeah, and everything I ever hunted, I ate. I didn't waste anything. I fish, and I kill the fish to eat them. Okay, I don't go to the supermarket. I'm not a vegetarian. I eat beef and pork and chicken, stuff like that. They're killed. I don't see what the big deal is. And yeah, there are times I love to go out and just target practice or skeet shoot with my 12 gauge. Clay pigeons and stuff. Not good at it, but I still like shooting at them. And so it's not all about hunting, folks. There are sports for these guns, so it's not all about there's only one purpose for these firearms, and it's killing. Well, you can say the same thing about bow and arrows. You could say the same thing about knives. That one of their purposes is to kill. That's not the only purpose they have. And to single out a gun as the only purpose for a gun is killing it's ridiculous. It's a logical fallacy in the extreme. It really is. Now, there's two more things I want to get to here. One is with CE Cup obliterates self-righteous journalists for becoming activists to push for gun control. On Thursdays, this is by Ryan Saverda over at the Daily Wire. He posted this today. On Thursday, headline news host SE Cup absolutely lambasted the media for how they are covering mass shootings, as many so-called journalists are taking off their mask and revealing that they are actually Democrat activists. I do know that there isn't likely a law existing or imagined that would have prevented it. And I could read on here, but I'll let her say this in her own words. And folks, this is one of these things that it's funny to me, because she points out all the errors in the lamestream media that I've been pointing out for years, and especially when it comes to their activism. If you want to be a journalist, you got to leave your activism at the door. You got to be unbiased in your reporting, even though you have a bias. You have to understand you do have a bias and try to work around that. But there's too many quote-unquote journalists in the lamestream media that have a bias, and they don't want to work around it at all. So let's give this a listen here real quick.
I don't know whether the NICS system failed, but I do know that there isn't likely a law existing or imagined that would have prevented it. Anyone who says otherwise isn't being honest with you. Speaking of honesty, If you're like me, you turn on the news to get information, a set of facts. If you want opinion, you come to shows like mine, where our prejudices and biases and opinions are made known. There's no false pretense that you're getting pure objectivity here. Well, if you turned on cable news last night and this morning, it's safe to say you didn't get the news. That's because when it comes to guns, news anchors take off their journalist hats and put on their activist hats. And they do it without shame or disclaimers because they believe righteousness is the same thing as being right. Many of these journalists blamed the gun lobby for what happened yesterday. They blamed the NRA, which represents law-abiding gun owners like me. I'll say it again, law-abiding gun owners. They blamed Republicans because Republicans represent a sizable constituency of gun owners who already comply with thousands of Byzantine gun laws that criminals don't follow. And so Republican lawmakers who do their jobs in representing those constituents are the problem. Republicans are also, these journalists will tell you, too afraid of the NRA to stand up to them. They'll courageously take to Twitter to link GOP lawmakers with the money they've received from the NRA. What they never say is that the NRA is why we have a background checks system in the first place. And it's the gun lobby fighting for it to be enforced. They, in fact, blame you because without a law degree, you couldn't possibly understand the Constitution. No, it's your ill-conceived notions of what the Second Amendment means that's the problem because you're too stupid to interpret it correctly, you know, the way they do. Then they put a Democratic lawmaker on or a former Republican lawmaker who shares their point of view to complain that Republicans will never do anything about guns. They never, these journalists, ask those lawmakers what Democrats did about gun control when they had the White House, the House, and the Senate for 2 years under Barack Obama, because the answer is nothing. These journalists never say, where was Democrats' courage? Were Democrats too afraid to lose their seats like they did in 1994 to pass another assault weapons ban when they could? Instead, they shake their heads, wag their fingers, look at the camera, and tell us to shut up because journalism. If they spend an hour blaming Republican lawmakers for the deaths of school children and calling their constituents too stupid to understand their own rights, don't be surprised when they don't want to come on. Maybe if they stopped disguising activism as journalism, they would. Maybe if they could have these conversations without offending half the country, they would. No. Let's keep having the same one-sided conversations on the news and then pound our fists that nothing ever changes. That makes way more sense. Look, this issue is hard. It's emotional. It's important. I want to change this as much as anybody, but we'll never get change as long as these people are leading the discussion.
All right, folks, that was S.E. Cupp over at Headline News, and she hit the nail right on the head. I mean, she literally hit the nail right on the head. And it is amazing to me how many of these folks in the lamestream media tout themselves as journalists, but yet they're just activists. And she's right. She is on an opinion piece on Headline News where her biases are out in the open, and she's not putting on a pretense otherwise, and putting her opinion out. Now, what it doesn't look, it's okay for her to do that. It's part of freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And if you don't like what she's saying, take her to task. Take her to task on what she's saying. But quit using your position in the Fourth Estate, the press, as an avenue of your activism in your reporting, erroneous, fake reporting that you do a lot of the times. Again, it just amazes me, the inside of S.E. Cupp. I mean, I like her. I read not a lot of her stuff, but I read some of her stuff, listen to a lot of her videos she has. She makes a lot of sense over her counterparts in the lamestream media. It really does. Now, the last article I want to get to today is with Mike Lee. It's a Daily Caller article by Christian Daytalk. He's in breaking news and engagement editor. Now, this was posted. Let's see here. This was posted. Was it today? You know what? I forgot to put the date down. Let me go back over and look at this. I always want to get the dates right so you know what I'm talking about. This was posted yesterday on the 15th. And folks, if you let me quickly say something here. If you do not have a reader option on your browser, you need to go to Firefox. I'm not being paid to do this, but I'll tell you what, on Firefox, they have this reader option that strips all the commercials and everything off, and it doesn't take the pictures out, but it gives you just what the article's reading, and it takes away a lot of the distractions for me. So that's just a point of order here on the Dan Clemens Show. Now, Senator Mike Lee told Daily Caller's Vince Coglianesi Thursday that when someone violates the law, the first instinct shouldn't be to say we need more laws. The Utah Republican, while discussing Wednesday's horrific tragedy in Parkland, Florida, noted that the rhetorical flaws in trying to regulate behavior of people who don't obey the laws we already have on the books. And this is something we talked about a lot here on the show. Someone has violated a whole bunch of laws by the time it reaches something like this, Lee explained. Let's figure out what's wrong. If we need more laws, we can consider that at the moment. But I have never been a believer in any area that the violation of one law in any area means we need a new law covering that same subject matter. Now, I had a video and I couldn't get the video off of the website to show it with you. But anyway, he basically saying the same thing here. Coglianesi further pressed Lee on why the initial response to incidents such as these is to immediately task the government with finding a solution. Lee didn't exactly expand on why, but pointed out another problem with this type of behavior. Many of the most serious problems we have related to other things that require an even more powerful source for help, he continued. When we look at the breakdown of family structure, when you look at the fact that we have adopted a culture that sadly accepts and in some cases embraces violence far too quickly, we're not going to be able to legislate that immediately. People are reluctant to turn in that direction. And you could heap another bunch of things on there. We hear this hand wringing. And folks, don't get me wrong. I believe it to be rightly so. I really do. That this hand wringing is going on. But the one thing you have to remember with all this, folks, is that we live in a culture of death. We have these, and there's some on the right that believe this too, but we have folks out in the country, whether you're on the left or right, that support the aborting of unborn children at somewhere around 3,000 innocent souls a day. We have people that support euthanasia. And folks, I think about shows like Logan's Run, where the government controls all that. You know, where will that euthanasia end? You know, and it scares me to put that into the hands of politicians. We have, and again, there's no links to video games, but we do live in a culture of violence. We have violent video games. We have violent movies. Normal people that don't have mental issues can separate fantasy from fiction, but then you have a group of people out there that they struggle with that. So what do you do with that? You know, you can't ban the movies and the games and stuff like that. You're just not going to be able to do that. But we need to be able to recognize that some people have an issue with that. Some people cannot process that like you and I can. So there has to be some type of middle ground. And what's being screened about today for gun control and new laws would never have stopped this. There's not a new law, in my opinion, there's not a new law that you can put forward that would have taken care of this one way or the other. There just isn't. And again, we have to, I think we have to be realistic. We have to be realistic about this because of the Second Amendment. I know some people want to get rid of the Second Amendment. I know they really do. But the problem with getting rid of the Second Amendment is you're actually taking away people's right to defend themselves. Whether you agree with that right or not, you're taking away their right to defend themselves. And honestly, I don't think you have that right. I don't think you have that right to take away my means of defending me and mine, or defending us against a tyrannical government that might someday be installed in the country. I don't think you have that right. And I'll argue with you till I'm blue in the face about that. It's been the Dan Clemens Show. I'm your host, Dan Clemens, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, folks, and God bless. And again, if you have any questions about the show, do not hesitate to either leave comments in the bottom of this video or go to thedanclemenshow.com and click the contact button and send me a link to email if you want to. Remember, have a great rest of the day, folks, and God bless. And on Sunday, attend the Church of God's choice, not your choice. And we'll see you on the next video.